morning, everybody. Good morning and welcome to the Dolly Museum. Very pleased to have so many people here. I do want to let you know that we are also open next door in the theater, and we have some overflow seating there. So if you don't mind not having coffee with you, it's a more comfortable sit. So if you are looking for a chair, please feel free to take advantage of that. We're very pleased to have all of you here, and we're very pleased to have a number of people from the Morean Arts Center. Welcome. We're pleased to have you here for this wonderful program. This is a program, Coffee with a Curator, that other program, that we do on the first Wednesday of every month in the morning. And we thank Cafe Gala for providing refreshments for it. So hopefully you've been able to take advantage of that. There's a number of things I just want to mention that are coming up that will be of interest to you that I just wanted to cover quickly before I go into my part of the talk this morning. First off, the next Coffee with a Curator that's going to be coming up will be on May 4th, and that's with my colleague Craig Petersburg, who's going to be talking about the mind and creativity, a part 2 of a program he gave last year. And then on June 1st, we are very pleased to have Margot Hammond, who is a colleague of ours, who's going to be talking about the collector in relation to modern art and a variety of different collectors that she's going to feature. And then July 6th, although I have not asked her, our curator is Joan Croft, and we're going to be asking her to do a presentation on Horst P. Horst, which is going to be our summer exhibition, the photography of Horst, which is going to be amazing. Real quickly, I know there are some people in here who are amazing speakers and have a great interest in art. If you are interested in becoming a docent here at the Dolly Museum, we are starting our program in September. It's going to be probably first or second week of September when it starts. So if you're interested, we're taking registrations now. We're going to be doing interviews in May. So definitely, if that sounds intriguing, get with one of us or go online. We have applications there. We would love to hear from you and welcome you into the fold, so to speak. A couple other things coming up. This Thursday on April 7th, the Sci Cafe is going to be here for a special one-off program. Normally we do that on Tuesday nights, but we're doing it this Thursday because of a very special guest who's going to be here. He is an expert on oceanographic incidents and events, and it's going to be called Extreme Ocean Events, Storms to Sardines. The Sci Cafe is excellent. I definitely encourage you to come. It is free, but it does require an RSVP. So you just need to go online and go to the link and RSVP for that. Also, April 14th, we have our poetry at the Dolly with Helen Pruitt-Wallace, the Poet Laureate of St. Petersburg, and it's going to be a great program. We invite you to join us for that. That's also free. And what we're going to be hearing about at the end of today's talk from Amanda is the Exquisite Corpse Yourself, which is a program we're doing in collaboration with the Morean Arts Center. It's going to be on Saturday, April 30th and Saturday, May 14th, where you will have a chance to go and participate in the program or the project that we're going to be discussing today. Finally, last but not least, Tuesday, May 24th, it's a bit out, but tickets are now on sale for a play by Roxanne Fay. It's focusing on Alice, who was the model for Alice in Wonderland. It's a play she's writing. It's going to be only performed here one night, so a lot of people out there are fans of Roxanne, so if that sounds intriguing, definitely get your tickets sooner instead of later. And with that, today we are going to be talking about the Exquisite Corpse, a parlor game that has become something much more than what it initially seemed to be. I am very pleased to be joined by Amanda Cooper, who is from the Morean Arts Center, the curator there. She's going to be talking about a project they have called the Exquisite Porch. It is fantastic, it's wonderful, and if you enjoy the idea of gamesmanship and game playing, I think you will really be intrigued by what she's going to be sharing. I'm going to be talking about the historical context for this game because it really does come through Surrealism. And Dolly, as a Surrealist, gives us ample opportunity to justify this collaboration. And just real briefly, we are very pleased to be able to do these kind of collaborations. I'm thrilled that we are doing this with the Morean. We were able to have Kent Lydecker here a while back to talk about a project that he was interested in, and we hope to be able to continue to have these kind of collaborations with other institutions here in the Bay Area. Okay, so Surrealism and the Exquisite Corpse. The very first thing to say is that in 1924, this particular book, which I've talked about many times, the Manifesto of Surrealism, was published. André Breton, the leader of the group, wrote it, and he does not discuss any place in here, this game. So the game itself comes from ideas that were stated in the book, and in particular, this definition of surrealism informs the game very completely. For André Breton, he said that he felt that there was a future resolution for two very different states, for dream and reality, which are so seemingly contradictory, into an absolute reality, a surreality. His goal was to bring together opposites, to find a way to put your foot in two very, very different realities simultaneously, and that by bringing these two opposites together, you create tension, and then there's a kind of euphoric release that comes out of that. One of the tenets that was put forward by the Surrealists was the idea of the random, the arbitrary, the unexpected. In the early 1920s, they embraced this notion of randomness, and they thought that it could potentially provide for a very meaningful art, despite our sense that it's not controlled by us. The Surrealists sought to exploit the random, the chance element, the accidental. They really did embrace this idea that through calamity, through chance, through even misunderstandings, great things can come out of it. And it was a strategy in particular because it allowed them to suppress the ego. So the Surrealists were very much involved in trying to redefine the role of the artist. They felt that the artist, as an active figure, was overtrained and very rational. They felt that, you know, in order to become an artist, you go through a number of steps, which leads you to be very much like a professional. You know, you have learned certain lessons, certain skills, you have certain associations, and as a result, you are somewhat biased in terms of your output. So they felt that by turning to the random, turning to the arbitrary, turning to chance, this eliminated on some level that controlling ego that the artist normally has. So for example, this is a piece that you probably can't see. It is very, very light, but André Masal was one of the great artists associated with the Surrealist movement who had a very particular skill, and that skill was that he could very quickly create a web of lines without any premeditation, and at a certain point he would start to look at those lines and certain forms would be suggested, and he would start to define those and bring out forms that were seemingly unexpected. And what really intrigued him and intrigued his colleagues, such as André Breton, was the fact that he seemed to find things that were very meaningful and relevant to his own biography. It was as if by producing this random pattern, he would start to recognize things that had to do with his own suffering in World War I, in his own sort of violent tendencies, in relationships with other people. And he'd be able to pull this out of the network of lines. So in a sense, the random pattern, the pattern that was not controlled, leads to self-discovery. There was another very important tenet of the Surrealists, which is the idea of the virtue of the group activity. So if we're talking about the ego and how to repress ego, if you bring together several people and you have them participate in a project, you are not as much in control if you have colleagues who are part of a team. Max Ernst had a description for this. He was one of the Surrealist artists, and he said that he felt that a mental contagion or shared consciousness would actually exist when you brought together a group of artists working on a similar project. And so this is a very popular, very well-known photograph. Essentially, it's the Surrealist engaged in automatic writing. And you have this typewriter right in the very center. You have Breton's wife, Simone, sitting at the typewriter. And then all of these Surrealists who are very intently engaged and actively brought together in this group project. And what they were trying to explore was very similar to things that we're familiar with through, say, Gertrude Stein, the idea of automatic writing, automatic text, a kind of welling up of a voice within inside, which is recorded as soon as it's spoken without any concern for censorship or trying to turn that, craft it into something different. They really felt that the voice itself, uncensored, would provide its own kind of image of the unconscious thought. And so they engaged for a number of years in trying different methods to approach automatic writing, but it was very much seen as a collective activity. And in 1931, this is a group photograph again. The Surrealists definitely did not see themselves as individuals, but rather as a group working together as colleagues towards a similar goal. And they embraced, one of the key thinkers they embraced was L'Autrement, and he made this comment that applies very much to the Exquisite Corpse. He said, "Poetry must be made by all and not by one." He felt that everybody could be a true poet, and that professional poets were somewhat invalid and unnecessary, that everybody has a poetic spirit. And they embraced this idea. They felt that everybody could participate, which leads us to the wonderful egalitarian nature of the game. And there is a game called Consequences. It's a game from the 19th century. It's a children's parlor game. And essentially, it's kind of like Mad Lib. You write a word or a phrase on a piece of paper, usually a noun. You fold it over, pass it to the next person without them seeing it. They will write the verb. The next person will write an adverb, and then finally a fourth person will write an object. And it can be varied, but essentially you are producing a sentence collaboratively, and it's fun, and it's filled with surprises. So you fold the sheet, you can seal it. By the time it gets to the last player, you open it up, and you have a bewildering composite sentence created by a number of people. It's great fun. I'm sure everybody here has done something similar to that. 1925, the Surrealists engaged in this game. Again, the game of consequences. And the first team that actually engaged in this was Yves Tanguy, Jacques Prévert, André Breton, and Marcel Duchamp. And according to the story, they produced a sentence that, for all of them, struck them dead in their tracks. It seems so almost like a voice from the past, a voice from the symbolist movement of the 19th century. Essentially, they wrote, Le cadavre exquis boira la vin nouveau. The exquisite corpse will drink the new wine. And they felt that this was such a powerful sentence, bewildering and yet absolutely mesmerizing, that it led to the name The Exquisite Corpse. That's where the term comes from. It's from this very first group activity of creating these sentences. Here's 3 more examples. I'll go through them somewhat quickly. The completely black light lays down day and night, the powerless suspension to do any good. Very curious, very strange. You could spend a lot of time with the kind of Freudian psychoanalysis on this and reveal different things. They have the power, I suppose, of almost like a haiku, a bewilderment haiku. The next one, the anemic young girl got the wax mannequins turned red. And then the final one here is Monsieur Poincaré, if you want, kisses on the mouth with a peacock feather in an ardor I never saw before, the late Monsieur Le Bonnois. What it means is up for anyone's interpretation. It seems very provocative. Perhaps if you had a mystery novel of the early 19th century and you read that first sentence, you would be intrigued and want to go further. And that's exactly what they were excited about, this kind of unusual frisson. So the idea of bewilderment is definitely a virtue of the process. André Breton goes on to say that here you have some of the sentences obtained in this way, which we just saw, chosen amongst those that gave us the greatest impression of bewilderment and never seen, of which we much appreciated the shaking value. What he means by the shaking value, I'm not quite clear, but I think it's that idea to stun, to amaze, to captivate. And so, for example, this is one of the visual versions of the Exquisite Corpse, done by many of the same figures we talked about. And there's a coming together of 4 completely different people creating something that seems almost bestial and monstrous, and yet at the same time, it could not have been created by any one of them because they would have taken it in a different direction, try to make it more coherent. We're going to come back to a couple more of these and then lead to Amanda's talk. But what was very exciting for us, and in particular in relation to the Exquisite Porch, is the fact that this same game can be applied to visual images as well as written words. So the Surrealists suddenly realized that the same principles could be applied. And so for this game, usually with 3 to 4 players, almost always with 4, but sometimes with 3, they would do it basically in terms of using either drawings or collage. They would fold the sheet of paper into 3 or 4, and they always approached it almost every time as a body. Head, torso, legs, almost without fail. Every now and then it would go sideways, but almost always it was this kind of composite structure, head, torso, legs. And what they created were definitely a kind of Frankenstein production of monstrous origin. So for example, this is 1926. Man Ray on the top, folds it over so that just a couple lines can be seen by the next person. Tanguy does the next section, the upper torso. Miro does the lower torso, and then finally Max Maurice does the bottom. So on the bottom of this poor gentleman who's naked, weighing on his back, is this incredible sort of organic outgrowth from Miro, which goes into this very violent and sexual image by Tanguy, and then winds up with the lovers connected in the heart shape by Man Ray at the top. The first time the Surrealists talked about this, they published not just one or two, but they actually published 15 sentences and 10 of these visual images. And they did it in their magazine in 1927. And they didn't have any commentary on it. It was just included as part of as like one of the essays, but they did it in conjunction with an essay by Freud that was recently translated into French about the idea of the lay analyst. And essentially the story goes that, that there was a particular analyst or a particular analysis that was offered, and the gentleman was being sued because he did not have the medical background in order to offer this. Freud wrote a defense of this gentleman, saying that actually the scientific apparatus sometimes becomes more cumbersome than needed, and that indeed many of the artistic and cultural figures are better equipped in order to do Freudian psychoanalysis. So it was this really revelatory moment which was seized upon by the Surrealists immediately and applied to this idea. It's the idea that everybody can participate in this, and everybody can participate in the analysis of this. So multiple authors placed side by side. The works result in irrational links. The Exquisite Corpse brings about this randomness, and creativity acts as a kind of symbolic exchange between the different figures. So here's another one from 1926, the same group of people. Here we have a nude. It's a female, sort of, this time. And again, you start to look at it and you realize there's just some really strange things happening here. There seem to be two badminton rackets or some sort of rackets at the very bottom out of which the body grows. And then Moreau turns it into definitely a female torso at the bottom, but there's numbers to the side, and there's an arrow that seems to pierce into or Man Ray pierces the arrow into the Moreau swirly top, which seems to be part breast, part whirl, and then it goes up into this kind of figure who's also transforming or metamorphosizing into a plant. Fun. I think that's the most important way to see it. And so this game suddenly became a strategy, and Breton says that what started as a fun pastime eventually became an enriching endeavor. The goal of the chain association game was to create new attachments between words and images to elicit the marvelous through a fortuitous revelation. So they were looking for revelations. They were looking for things that surprised, that shocked, and would lead to new ideas. Here's another one that's very disturbing in many respects. We have sort of giraffe legs at the bottom, or at least one of them seems to be a giraffe. The other seems to be some monstrous thing. The woman's lower skirt has these bells on it. And they go into this kind of formal pattern. Moves up into the top area with the breast exposed on top of the clothing, and then finally we get to the face, and the face has been inverted with the lips above, the eye below, the ears have moved in. It's all very crazy, it's very fantastic, and again, it's something that could not have been created by one person. It has that kind of extraordinary Frankenstein element to it. Another quote by Breton, Group Endeavor. What excites us about the production was the assurance that, for better or worse, they bore the mark of something which could not be created by one brain alone, and that they were endowed with a much greater leeway which cannot be too highly valued by poetry. So he felt that ultimately this had a poetic resonance to it, that it wasn't just clever and fun, but there was something very beautiful and strange being produced in the process. Strange and beautiful. This is an Exquisite Corpse from 1934, and what you start to notice is in the 30s, it starts to become a little more elegant. This is one by Breton, Valentin Hugo, his lover, Paul Eluard, and his wife Nush Eluard, and it's basically on a piece of black paper where they've used a chalk to create the image, and it looks very much like here, like one person created it. There's a very kind of symbiotic connection between all four of the artists where it seems very much a unified type of structure, but very mysterious and very strange. So 2 quick notes about this, and then I will move out of the way so Amanda can talk to us about the Exquisite Porch. The first significance is that the poetic fragments are felt to reveal what Nicolas Calais, who was a Surrealist, characterized as the unconscious reality in the personality of the group. So it's as if you were tapping into the unconscious that could only be seen through the group activity. The result of this is going back to that idea of mental contagion that Max Ernst had mentioned. A little later, they start applying collage to this, and this is one by Breton, his wife Jacqueline Lamba, and Tanguy. And this seems to have very much to do with Marxism and 19th century industrialization. They were using the same book, but it still has this kind of evocative, crazy quilt kind of quality to it. Looks very much like a Dadaist product. The second comment by Breton, finally, with the Exquisite Corpse, we had at our command an infallible way of holding the critical intellect in abeyance and of fully liberating the mind's metaphorical activity. So again, eliminating that ego, eliminating that training, you only have a little bit you can do, you got to do something great with it. And that's what these lead to. So the final thing I'm going to share with you is just a couple images related to Dali. In 1927, Dali had not met any of the Surrealists. He was aware of them, very aware of them. He was about to meet Moreau, but he loved the game. He was very aware of the game. And here, in the middle of this detail from a painting called Cenicitas, I would argue is Dali's own Exquisite Corpse that he did not produce with anyone else. Yeah, Dali's ego, usually a little too uncomfortable working with others. So my argument would be that this strange totem that you see here, which has this chicken leg on the bottom, has a guitar with clock arms on it, this little strange upside down cylinder, there's a hairy egg on top of that, and this little bloody hand coming out of the top, almost like comically, I would argue is inspired completely by the Exquisite Corpse, and this kind of mental association of latching one thing onto another. And then two final Exquisite Corpses that Dali participated in, and again, this is very rare. This is one that was done by Dolly and Gala, and there's almost nothing that we see of Gala that has any sort of artistic drive, so it's fascinating. There's about 10 of these that I stumbled upon, and Andre Breton and Valentine Hugo, his lover at the time. So Breton and Hugo must have come to Cadaqués that summer to visit with Dali and Gala, and they did these games pretty religiously. So there's at least 10 of these that have been found. Dali's details are always the easiest to discover because they're usually the most fully developed. You know, he actually can't help himself but do scenes, so to speak. But, you know, again, we've got a ship on top of what seems to be a very strange sort of dice on top of a bird, which becomes just a series of might be claws, they might be fangs, they might be sights, and then finally the Dali landscape at the bottom. And then a second one that's a little more Freudian, perhaps. We've got the hot air balloon at the top, a couple breasts floating about, some spewing penises, and then finally the little finger at the bottom balancing the phone. Very Dalinian, and yet, again, produced with the group activity. And the very last image I have to share with you is this one from 1935, which I can't find any information on other than it says Dali Exquisite Corpse. And the question is, did anybody else help Dali with this? Is it a collaborative project? Or again, have we gone back to Dali doing his own Exquisite Corpse, where it kind of gives a lie to the whole idea about the group activity if he's the only one doing it? But it's intriguing and provocative, and I can say that unfortunately the museum does not own any of these, but it would definitely be a wonderful acquisition if we were able to bring something like this into our collection. So with that, I am now going to step aside and invite my colleague Amanda to come talk about the Exquisite Porch.
Hi. Wow, there's a lot of you. And I hope this mic doesn't pick up my stomach growling, so if you hear it, just ignore it. Can you hear me? You can? Okay, just you in the front. Okay, I'll try to speak loudly. I'm just curious, how many of you have been to the Morean Arts Center? Can I see a show of hands? Oh, wow, a lot of you. Okay. Let me see if this works. Whoops. Okay, there's the Morean Arts Center, for those of you who need your memory jogged. We're a community art center located about a mile away from here in downtown St. Petersburg on between 7th and 8th Street. And our mission is to connect people with art. It's very simple. And we do that in a variety of ways, mainly by hosting exhibitions of contemporary artwork and also offering classes in all artistic mediums to adults and kids. And we've been doing this actually for almost 100 years. In 2017, the Morean Arts Center will turn 100 years old, which is very exciting. So we've been connecting people with art in the community for a long time. And just to give you a little bit of my history, I'm a St. Pete native. I live in St. Pete now. I was born here. If my mother ever watches this, I have to say I was raised in Pinellas Park. So, I was a volunteer here at the Dolly Museum in the late 90s for a couple of years. Every other Sunday I was selling tickets at the front desk at the old building. In 1999, I got hired as the Curator of Exhibitions at the Art Center. It was called the Art Center back then, not the Morean. And this is what our staff looked like back in 1999 at the spring opening. We're missing a couple of people, but that was about it. And in case you were wondering, I'm the blonde in the background with the terrible haircut. I showed this picture to my 9-year-old daughter last night, and she could not pick me out of the lineup. I'm not kidding, so I don't know if that's good or bad that I don't look like that now. But anyway, so those were fun times. And I can't show you a picture of our staff right now because in the last, well, since 1999, we've grown exponentially. And now our staff is about 25 or more people. And we have 4 locations. The Art Center at the top left. We also have the Morean Hot Shop where we have live glass blowing demonstrations. And we have the Chihuly collection down on Beach Drive. Both of those opened in 2010. And last but not least, we now have the Morean Center for Clay, which is in the a historic Seaboard train station at the Warehouse Arts District. So we're a big organization connecting people with art for over 100 years. I wanted to talk a bit about my curatorial practice. And so I've been the curator there for a little over 17 years, and it's a very fun and wonderful job. And my thoughts about curating contemporary art exhibitions is kind of striking a balance. We're a community art center, and we are so lucky to have so many amazing artists who live in this city. And I could fill galleries over and over and over again with artists from this area, and we do. But what I like to try to do is to host exhibitions that show our local artists, but also show what's going on nationally and sometimes internationally. So you'll see a variety of shows at the Art Center. One month you might come and there'll be a member show, which means 250 local artists. And the next month you might come in and there'll be artists from California or New York. But my favorite type of exhibition is one that combines the two of them. When you see local artists combine with artists from other areas, that kind of puts our local artists in context with something bigger. Those are always my favorite shows. And I have 2 examples here, which ironically I did not curate either one of these, but this talk is about collaboration, right? The one on the left is a show called Leave a Message that we hosted back in September, and it was curated by Leon Teswan Bedore, who is an artist who lives in Tampa, and it was all about street art, graffiti art, and it showed the best graffiti artists in the country, including ones who live right here in our backyard. And that was coinciding with the Shine Mural Festival that most of you are aware of that happened back then. The one on the right is called Role Models, and it was curated by my coworker Melissa, who is here. Oh, you're back there. This is a really fantastic ceramics exhibition that through choosing 17 artists who work in ceramics, she told the story of how they mentor other artists and are mentored by other artists, and it ended up being a show of 50 artists from across the country, and now it's traveling to Kansas City, Missouri, and being shown there, so our local artists are being shown there. So that's my favorite kind of show. And I say all that because it's leading up to the show I'm supposed to be talking about, which is our Exquisite Porch show. And I hope some of you have already seen it. If not, I hope you will come see it soon. Exquisite Porch is the brainchild of Dominick Lombardi, and there he is. He is an artist. I put up an image of his work just to make the slide more interesting, and you would see that he's an artist, and there's a lot of surrealism in his work. He's an artist living in New York City, and he's also a freelance curator and a writer. He was an art critic for the New York Times for many years. He writes for Sculpture Magazine and for the Huffington Post. He just did a really great blog post about the Dali Museum that just went live, I think, yesterday, so you'll have to look it up and read it. It's fantastic. Anyway, the man never sleeps, I'm convinced. So I met him about 10 years ago when I was curating a show about tattoo art for the Art Center, and I included his work in it. And he called me up about 2 years ago and said, hey, why don't we do an exhibition together? And I said, sure. And Surrealism is very close to his heart, and the Exquisite Corpse game in particular. He tells this great story about this man that he met. When he was a kid, maybe about 5 or 6 years old, his grandparents had a house in Yonkers, and there was a man a mysterious older man who lived in the basement of that house that he and Dominick and his older brother would go and visit. And this man introduced them to a version of the Exquisite Corpse game. Sounds kind of creepy, but he speaks of it fondly. So anyway, but he used to play this game with this man. He called him the man downstairs. But he said it really made an impact on him and on his artistic practice. So anyway, it's logical for him to want to do a show like this. And of course, I thought it was great. Well, I've always been interested in surrealism. You can't live in Florida without, liking surrealism, if you read the news at all. And also, we have this fantastic museum in our city. So I said yes. So I sent him a floor plan of the gallery, and he saw that our walls at the Morean are more horizontal than they are vertical. So while, like Peter was saying, the Exquisite Corpse you usually think of as a vertical piece, ours were horizontal. And then he said, hey, why don't we take it a step further and make it a theme, make it be themed Florida wildlife, since it's kind of creepy-crawly critters. And I said, that's a great idea. And he came up with the name Exquisite Porch. So you can see this is all his idea. So don't try to read any of that up there. He decided how many artists could be accommodated in our gallery space. And we agreed that he gave out a number, and we each took half of those numbers. And I said, okay, I'll invite artists to play from Central Florida, because obviously those are the artists that I know best. And he would ask artists to play from New York, since those are the artists he knows best, and we would just combine them in the gallery and see what happens. So I asked artists, most of them said yes, and they were told they could choose a piece of paper that they would provide, either 24 by 24 inches, 18 by 18 inches, or 12 by 12 inches. And I sent a spreadsheet to Dominick with all my artists, and he sent out an email to every participant that looked like this. So this is all the artists got, a list of instructions, and they would know this is an example of what one of the bodies would look like. So this was one that was sent to Lawrence. You can see it says Lawrence, the fourth one in. Lawrence Flood is an artist in the show. So this is an example of what Lawrence would have gotten. Okay, here's your body, Lawrence. Here's the head, here's the tail. You're the fourth one in, and your piece is 24 by 24. And your connecting points are 12 inches high. That's all the artist got. He doesn't know who's on the other side of him, doesn't know anything. So, and I should mention, there are 74 artists in the show. So this was quite an undertaking to send out all these instructions that are pretty detailed to all these artists. We just kind of crossed our fingers and hoped for the best. So let's see. Oh, wait. And about the collaborative part of this, obviously this show is a collaboration, and we do many collaborations at the Art Center, but this one was really unique because it was a blind collaboration. Obviously, it was a blind collaboration among the artists because, like I said, they didn't know what was going on around them. But it was also a blind collaboration between Dominick and me because I didn't know the artists that he was selecting for the show, and he didn't know the artists that I was selecting for the show. Usually, I know there's not probably a lot of curators in here, but you can imagine a curatorial job is pretty precise. You want everything to go together. It has to look good as a whole. That kind of went out the window for this show, which was very liberating, as Peter was talking about. This sort of gave us the freedom to just do what we wanted to, and the artist as well. So what I wanted to do is talk about a couple of the artists that I selected for the show. I'm going to show you an image of what their typical work looks like, and then I'll show you the piece that they did for Exquisite Porch. This is a piece by Sabrina Small. I cheated with her a little bit because she currently lives in Philly, but she lived in Florida for about 20 years. So to me, she's always going to be a Florida artist. Sabrina's work is very strange. When I was selecting artists, I was looking for artists who were good draftsmen and that their work was a little creepy. That was just my thought for the show. So Sabrina fit that totally. Her work is very figurative. Some of it's autobiographical. She likes to combine realism or things from reality with her imagination. So this is what a typical piece of hers looks like. And this was her piece for Exquisite Porch. She had a section of the body, as you can see. And she said this was just perfect. I just thought this was a really successful piece. For doing a piece for this show, she wanted to make kind of a combination of all the critters she could think of that she'd seen while living in Florida. And she wanted to use the color green, but she made it fluorescent, which you can it's brighter in person. Because to her, even though this was about Florida nature, to her and to many of us, Florida can be kind of fake and artificial. So she wanted it to be not like something that you would actually see in nature, to remind you of that this isn't a real thing. Next, I wanted to talk about Ina Kaur. Ina is originally from India, and right now she is a professor of art at the University of Tampa. And she's known for her printmaking, her prints, and her multimedia installations. And she's an abstract artist, but I thought it might be interesting to see how she handles this challenge. And she's also known for her circular motifs. And she agreed to be in the show, and this is her piece, which I thought was really terrific. She had a tail, as you can see, an armadillo. Someone wrote about it being an armadillo butt in Creative Loafing, I think, and that's what it is. But I was really surprised and pleased by this piece because I'd never seen her do anything realistic before. And if you look at it closely, you can see it's still got her circular motif in there. So I thought that was a really cool piece. Next is Dennis Gaston. A lot of you might be familiar with him. He's one of these artists that should have a monument built to him, I think. He's a real Florida treasure, excuse me. And he's originally from West Virginia, but he has had a studio in the Dunedin, Clearwater area since I think the mid-'80s. So he's been around a long time. And this is a newer piece that he's done that is on view at, he has a show that just opened at Hillsborough Community College in Tampa. So this is his typical work. And then this is his piece for Exquisite Porch. And I asked him to tell me about this piece, and it's all ink on paper. It's a 12 by 12 inch piece. And he says, well, you know, when you asked me to be in this show, I was worried because he was making his work for the HCC show at the same time. He said, I didn't have a lot of time to devote it, so I had to make something simple. And he said, I went simple. I just made it black and white. And I thought, well, okay, this is why I love this man. But anyway, he said it was really good for him because he was making his paintings for the HCC show, and when he got stuck on a piece, were larger paintings, he would turn to this little 12 by 12 inch piece and start working on that. So it was kind of a relief from, he would go back and forth, he would spend 10, 15 minutes here and there. And it's probably hard to see from where you are, but all the center part is all eyes, obviously, but the other part, there's little tiny figures in there that he did with pen, and they each are their own little exquisite corpse. It's a head, a torso, and feet in there, and they're all different and unique and just mind-blowing. So there's his piece that he didn't spend a lot of time on. Next is Janette St Amour, who's actually on staff at the Art Center, and she has a company called Spectra Dimension. And her work is mostly laser cut things like wood and leather that she works on, and this is typical of her work, and I was curious how she would handle this challenge, and this is what she did. She did a tail, and it's called Golden Chameleon Dreams, and it's laser cut paper, just basic scrapbook paper that you can find in Michael's, because her dimensions were 12 by 12, and that's exactly the size of scrapbook paper. And she said when she was asked to be in the show, she automatically, by the way, the artist could pick if they wanted a head or a tail. Those were first come, first serve, and whoever didn't speak up first, they got a body part, or in the middle. So she obviously asked for a tail, but she thought of a chameleon immediately because of the color of their skin and the muscular body. And she is, like a true surrealist, interested in the connectedness of all things and how you can find patterns in nature. So she puts the Fibonacci spiral in there and the golden ratio, and I just thought this was a really beautiful piece. Some of the artists, no pun intended, really went out on a limb on this show and really did something different. I asked Kaylin Reed to be in the show. Kaylin is a little different because she only works in ceramics usually, and but her ceramic work really went with the tone of what I was going for this show. So not having ever seen anything two-dimensional from her, I asked her to be in the show, and she was a good sport and said yes. And this was her piece for the show. And it's made out of paper. It's a collage, the first collage she's ever done. And it's called Bones of Feather. And she said that she's been doing a lot of kayaking and is thinking about, Florida critters, particularly those that slither around and are made mostly of spine. And she thought, okay, obviously she has a middle section of the body. What if I picture that but do it what the creature looks like from the inside out? So she thought she would do that, a cross-section of the creature. So she was looking for paper that reminded her of meat and bone. And but she found out when she started working with the paper and tearing it that it was really feathery when she tore it. It didn't look like bone at all. It wasn't hard, it was soft. So she just said, okay, it's a creature that has feathers inside of it instead of bone. So very surreal. So I thought this was a cool piece, and I really loved that she's an artist that kind of went outside her comfort zone to make something. Of course, most of us are familiar with Stephen Kenny's work. This is an example of one of his luminous paintings. I asked him to be in the show, pretty sure he would say no, but he didn't. He said yes. And then when he made the piece, before I'd seen it, he says, "You're not going to recognize it as one of mine." And he was right. This is his piece for the show. And it's just a fantastic piece, and he really surprised me with this one. It's a mixed media piece, and in the center there is a desiccated lizard that he found in his studio and saved it for a rainy day. And so he put that, and then here I come calling. So he put that in the center, and then he wanted to make a swath of kind of like an army of lizards marching around it, sort of oblivious to what happened in the middle there. But he couldn't find a stamp, a lizard stamp anywhere, so he's Stephen Kenny, and he made one out of a pencil, or out of an eraser. And so obviously the theme here is Florida wildlife, but once he started making the piece, he was thinking about bigger, more serious issues like the European immigration crisis and how you have large numbers of people moving from one place to another, and some are passing away along the way, and just about the atrocities that we commit towards each other and the indifference that we feel towards them sometimes. And the figures around them are from Bruegel's Massacre of the Innocents that he found a print of, or a copy of, and cut out some of the figures in there and then collaged them into his work to further that idea. So a really beautiful piece, really poignant piece that makes you really think. So I've shown you some specific pieces. I wanted to show you how, kind of zoom back a little bit and show you how they look in the gallery. This is a detail of a body. This is part of a larger piece, and these are all mostly New York artists. At the far right, there's a work by Chad Mize, who's a very popular local artist. This is another detail of a larger body. On the right is a beautiful painting by Neverne Covington, who I asked to participate and was very glad she said yes. This is her roseate spoonbill that I just think is incredible. This is one of the only pieces I can show you close up of a whole one. There are 8 different bodies in this show, and they range in size from 3 feet, this is the smallest one, to 37 feet in length. So this is one of the only ones I can show you close up and intact, and this one's so funny. So here is the big one. You can see how it wraps around the wall in the gallery. One of the ideas that Dominick had for this show was to show the diversity of the artists. As I said before, all of the artists are either, with a few exceptions, are either from Central Florida or from the New York City area. And we all know that most of us living in Central Florida or New York City are not actually from those areas. So we wanted to show sort of the melting pot-ness of both these areas. So we did a little something unusual when we contacted the artists about being in the show. We asked them to provide us with the year that they were born, and the place that they were born, and their blood type. I'm just kidding about that last one. Just didn't know if everybody was still awake, okay. So because we wanted to show the diversity of all these artists, and instead of being a typical museum show where you see a painting and it says, this is by this artist, this is the title, et cetera, et cetera. We have their name, the year they were born, and the place that they were born, so you can go through and see the diversity. So I just wanted to say a couple facts about the artists in the show. As I said before, there are 74 artists altogether. Out of the 74, only 7 of them, 7 artists out of 74, were actually born in Florida, which was pretty significant. And only 2 of those were born in St. Pete. And none of the 2 that were born in St. Pete actually lives here. Out of the 74 artists, 16 of them are from 15 different countries originally. So, and they represent every single continent except for Antarctica. We slacked there. But there's also an age range of 50 years. So the oldest artist in the show is in his 70s, and the youngest artist is 21. So it's a very diverse group, the 74 artists. And they all bring in their cultural, generational viewpoints, that informs their work. So, and you'll see it when you see the show in person. So here's another shot of the gallery where you can see some of them. Next, really quickly, I wanted to talk about some of Dominick's choices for the show, some of the ones that are my favorite. This one is by an artist named Vicky Khuzami, who lives in New York City. She's known for her murals and her illustrations. And when she was asked to be in the show, she did a little research and she was thinking of the creature from the Black Lagoon. Now, the creature from the Black Lagoon is supposed to be from the Amazon, but she found out that it was actually filmed in Florida. So she was like, there's my Florida connection. And I said to Dominick, this painting is why I'm a Florida native, but I will not go in natural bodies of water because of this sort of thing. I'll send my kids in there, but I will not go. So, but it's a beautiful painting. Despite the subject matter, it's watercolor with mica. So it's got kind of a shimmery effect that you can't see from here, but it's a really elegant piece. And I was in the gallery with a friend of mine, and she said, was talking about what a beautiful piece it was, and she said, it's kind of erotic how the lips of the creature match the toenail polish on the foot. And I said, yeah. That's what it is. Well, it brought to mind something that Vicky Khuzami does for a living, and that is she does illustrations for romance novel covers. So, and this is an example of one. If you go to her website, you'll see all of them. So I just love that. It's really not too different. So there you go. Moving on. On a more serious note, this is a piece by Camille Esquel, who lives in New York, and this is just an incredibly beautiful, detailed multimedia piece. And it's called Gypt, J-I-I-P-D, standing for Jewish Iraqi Indian Princess. And this is from a larger body of work, and of course you can see she had a middle portion of the body. You can see the snake imagery going through the middle. These images are all of women who are related to her on her mother's side, and she is of Jewish Iraqi Indian heritage, and she makes note of the fact that these cultures typically don't treat women the same as men, and so it's kind of an homage to the women in her family. And there's a Hebrew prayer that's in there in the yellow strip, and it's derived from a prayer where a man is thanking God that he didn't make him a woman. So it's sort of fraught with many issues, but it's just an incredible, beautiful piece. I wanted to show it to you. This is another piece that I really loved by an artist named Mikey Monson, who lives in New York, and it's called Tea Party in the Belly of a Beast. And there you have a little girl who is having a tea party in the middle of this alligator belly. And I asked her to talk to me about this piece, and she's a mom of 2 young girls. And she said, when you're little and you're a mom looking at your kids, your kids are so innocent. They don't know what big bad world they're part of. So she wanted to convey that in this piece. She said this figure is actually a composite of her and her daughters. And she says, there are your kids playing, and they don't realize the awfulness of the world that's out there, and you want to protect them as long as you can. And she said she liked the idea of the combination of the soft and girly next to the rough skin of the alligator, and the thought about an alligator tent with the skin flapping in the breeze, and the painted wallpaper, or the painted shapes behind her is supposed to mimic wallpaper that would be in a child's playroom. So here's the walls that are enclosing your child in and keeping them safe. But also interesting to note is the fact that she's a scenic designer. So I thought that was pretty cool looking at this piece. I wanted to close with this work by Zain York, which I hope you can see because it is amazing. When I saw this image, I was just in awe. Zain is originally from Nebraska and currently lives in Brooklyn. And this piece is called Self-Portrait with Fence Lizards and Fire Ants. It doesn't get more Floridian than that, folks. And it's a showstopper. I said this could be in the gallery by itself and it would be okay. And what makes it even more amazing, this was done in ballpoint pen. People think it's a digital piece, but it's not. It's ballpoint pen on toned paper. I just think it's stunning. You have to see it in person. This was a really fun exhibition to do. There was a lot of freedom in doing this. Dominick was fun to work with. He wrote an article about the show for the Huffington Post, so I love that a lot of our local artists got mentioned in the HuffPo. That's pretty amazing. So as a curator here at a community arts center, that it just doesn't get any better than that. So, and we're planning on collaborating on future events, maybe bringing a show about Florida artists to some of the New York City galleries he works with. So we're really excited about that. Let's see, what's the next slide? So come to the Morean, see the show. There's another show we have going on at the same time that is dear to my heart. It's work by an artist named Jody Faucet. Jody is a Atlanta-based photographer, and his work is very surreal in nature. And I've been following his work for about 10 years, and it's just amazing. You'll love seeing his work. And if you needed one more reason to come to the Art Center, like Peter said, you can Exquisite Corpse yourself on Saturday, April 30th, or Saturday, May 14th. I said before, the Art Center, we connect people with art, and this is a way we can connect people to the current exhibition. We've partnered with the Dolly Museum on other activities. We did Andy Warhol, something with Dolly for the Picasso show, so this is just another collaboration with the Dolly that we're excited about, and you too can make a flattering portrait of yourself. That's Jonathan, our Director of Education. That's his portrait. So that's it. Thank you for listening, and thank you to the Dolly for inviting me, and I hope to see you guys at the Morean.